So can you tell us your name?
Juanice Glaze.
Okay, and so you were just saying that you're a pharmacist and your husband's a doctor
Correct.
and you have 3 children.
Yes.
How old are your children?
My daughter is 21, and then I have twin boys that are 19.
Okay, so when going to, first of all, in both you and your husband's training, when you know, pharmacy school and medical school, did you guys ever get any training on the dangers of vaccines?
No.
None.
Not even as a pharmacist.
So what did you question the vaccines? Because you used to administer
No,
vaccines.
because I didn't. I've never administered a vaccine. No. No, I never questioned it because we were in the medical field, and you know we wanted to be right on schedule. We tried to do everything exactly right through the whole pregnancy, and then whenever they were born, going through the vaccine schedule. I mean, whenever it was time, I was at the doctor. You know, never thought anything about it. That's just what you did. You know, we're trying to be a good parent, and that's what you did.
And your husband was the same?
Yeah. We just thought we were doing the right thing.
All right, so when did you see the first injury?
I noticed it whenever I was pregnant with the twins already. And so my daughter had already been vaccinated, and I'd taken her to the beach, and she was about 15 months old, I guess. And I noticed that she was covering up her ears, and her language, she used to, you could understand everything except maybe 1 or 2 words. And then it got to where it was the opposite. You could only understand 1 or 2 words. And we didn't know what was going on, so then we started speech therapy for her. Did that for a year. This whole time we had no clue it had any connection to the vaccine. So in the meantime, I have the twins, you know, we're going along, still having her tested different places, trying to figure out what's going on. So when the boys came along, we just started doing their vaccines, just right on schedule, just like they were supposed to be, because we still had no idea that was any connection at all. So when the boys had their MMR, they had an adverse reaction to it. I noticed that they were crying and had a high fever and all at night, and so my husband, he said, well, just take them over to the immediate care. So I did, took them over there. They said, no, they have the flu. And I said, no, you don't understand. They just had their vaccines like 2 days ago, and they've been running a high fever, and they've been crying all night. And I said, oh, well, that's just typical. And I said, well, I know, you know, that yes, they can run a low-grade fever, but not like they're doing. And anyway, they told me they had the flu and sent us home. So,
do you remember what vaccines you actually gave the boys then?
That day, I think it was their MMR. And we went, then the boys, I started noticing one day that they just weren't responding to me. And I went behind one of them, was talking, and they just didn't turn around. And I got behind them and I clapped, and no response. And I got some pot lids and banged those, and no response. So I took him to the pediatrician. She sent us over to the ENT. They did an audiogram on him. One of the twins had lost all of his hearing.
It's okay.
And one of them had lost a part of his hearing. So then they sent us over to another hospital, and they did an evoked response test to see if it was the auditory nerve that had been damaged. And it wasn't that. And so they told us, well, that maybe their hearing would come back. So the boy that had lost all of his hearing, his finally did come back in 3 months. My twin that lost partial hearing, his didn't come back. He still has a partial hearing loss. Anyway, so that's when we started figuring out, okay, something's going on here, you know, that has made them lose their hearing. They're acting different. They started being just not like our children, you know. They were just totally different. Lauren had been talking and walking. I was a mom that was in a group of, we called it moms of multiples here in Hattiesburg. So I was around a lot of people that had twins, and my twins were progressing just like theirs. We'd get together and talk about what everybody was doing, you know, sitting up, walking, talking, and they were doing fine, and then all of a sudden they weren't. So at that time, this many years ago, there wasn't a lot known about the vaccine injury, and nobody knew what really caused it or what to do or anything. So many years here, everybody thought another mom and I were crazy by thinking it was the vaccines, and especially everybody in the medical field. And eventually, the pediatrician we used finally went back and pulled their medical records and told me one day when we went in, she said, you know, I told you all those years ago that I didn't think it had anything to do with their vaccines, but she said, I went back and pulled their records, and I really do. And I said, she says, but I don't know what to do for you. I don't know where to tell you to go to get help, but she says, anything that I can, any tests you need run, any blood work you need drawn, I'll do any of that for you. She said, I just don't know where to send you or how you get help.
This is the pediatrician that gave them the vaccines. Wow.
Yeah. So that started our journey about, you know, all the different treatments we tried with them. And some made them somewhat better, not like a lot of people that had a recovery story. We still don't. We still have to have 24/7 care for the kids, whether it's me being at home or we have a babysitter. And like my husband said, you don't really ever budget for a babysitter for 21 years. You know, you think you'll have them for a few years, and then, you know, everybody's up on their own and out of the house and everything, and we're older parents, and we will still be working and to try to take care of them as long as we possibly can. So one of the boys is more severe than the other one and was much more aggressive and destructive, and so now he's in a residential facility. And he stays there he stays up there during the week, and I pick him up on Fridays, and then I take him back on Sunday nights. So I actually had to take him back early tonight so I could come and do this. But he comes home every weekend, and then the other two are here and go to the public school here. Last year at the facility, they required him to have an MMR or a varicella to stay in school up there. So they sent the paperwork home, and my husband and I talked about it, and I said, I can't do that. And he said, well, we don't really have a choice. He said, we can't bring him home. We can't take care of him here at home. So the pediatrician called and asked him would they let her just do the titers, the MMR titers. And they said that they would let her do the titers on the MMR, but he had to have the varicella. And she's like, that makes no sense. If everybody else, you know, has it, it doesn't make any sense for him to have that. And it's chickenpox. A lot of us have lived through the chickenpox, and you know, you may have a scar or two, but you know, that's it. Anyway, his titers were still high. Every time it was time for a booster in their upbringing, we would always do the titers, and the titers were still so high that from their very first MMR, they have never had to have another booster. They cannot get it out of their system. Their levels are still that high. Anyway, we had to have the varicella. We went through with it. I went home and cried that night. Not knowing what I'd done to my child again. Anyway, the nurse started calling me from the facility and said, Matthew's just on himself. Said that he's running up and down the hall screaming. We've never seen him like this. In a couple of days, a different shift of nurses called, and they said he's running up and down the hall. He's opening doors and just slamming them at all hours of the night. And a few days went by. Another set of nurses called and said he's down there banging his head against the wall. And I told him, I said, well, you know what?
y'all were the ones who told me I had to give him this vaccine. Y'all mandated him to have this vaccine for him to be able to stay here. I told you he could not have him. He could not tolerate them. I said, so y'all are just going to have to deal with it. This is what I dealt with all these years with 3 of them at home, the same kind of behavior. And I've had to deal with that. And y'all were the ones who said we had to have it. So y'all are just going to have to deal with it. So he's still up there. And we're not back to where we were with him, but he's getting better. His behaviors are getting better. He still has a lot of destructive days. He will pick up the top of the toilets and slam them down and bust them. He's done that several times up there. Peels all the paint off the walls, just, you know, all kinds of different things. But he is getting better. I mean, he'll never recover, but I mean, he's getting better as to possibly where he was before he had this next set of vaccines. But he still has a partial hearing loss, so he still talks like a hearing impaired child.
So he does talk?
Yes. They have limited language. Lauren went to a special school here at the university. It was Children's Center for Communication Development, and we did that until she aged out there, and then the boys finally went there. And then there was another school called the DeBard and for speech and language, and she did that and finished up their program. And so she can read and she can write and she can talk. She still has a lot of other problems, social problems. She doesn't understand like money and, you know, literal things. She takes everything very literal. She doesn't know what's supposed to be funny, what isn't, kind of things. Matthew will always have to be in some type of group home or some type of facility.
Which you have to pay for yourself?
No,
Insurance?
we do not. And the other twin is still at home, and he can talk some, but he has an augmentative talking device also that he uses so that whenever he goes out in the community, their class does a lot of community trips to try and get them used to, you know, to everyone else and everyone else getting used to them. So he carries that, so if he needs to order something at Burger King or whatever, he can type it in and it can say it for him. So he can, you know, he's learning to do that out in the community. I want him to be able to be as independent as he can be. So he does have a language, but it, like I say, it is limited. To look at them, they're 3 beautiful kids that you'd never know there was anything in the world wrong with them. And that's a blessing, but it was also not a blessing when they were younger. And you would take them in a store and they would have a meltdown and people would look at you. They didn't know anything was wrong. They just thought that you were an awful parent, you know, and they'd say, well, you ought to just make your kid be quiet. We've even had the sheriff's department had a babysitter driving them around one Sunday, and I was at work, and the sheriff's department, a deputy, pulled them over and told the babysitter that the child in the front seat didn't have their seatbelt on, and she says, yes, he does, he just can't hold it right close to him. He said, well, he had his feet on the dash, and she said, well, yeah. And the other one was in the back, you know, just kind of rocking to the music. And she said, yeah, but, you know, they're fine. I wasn't speeding. I wasn't doing anything. I didn't run a red light, nothing. And he says, well, if you can't, she says, they're just autistic. And he said, well, if you can't control them any better than this, maybe I'll just need to stay at home. So, like I say, sometimes it's a blessing that they are normal, beautiful children. And then sometimes not so much because people don't understand.
They don't understand, you're right.
So,
I'm sorry, it's a heartache.
anyway,
What's happened
that's
to your
kind of our
children.
story.
But you and your husband must be so disappointed and angry with the medical community that trained you guys and have lied to you, effectively lied to you.
My husband has a much harder time with it than I do. it's hard for him to be at work and see everybody with these beautiful, healthy children, and us thinking we did everything possible, and then seeing other people come in with children that they didn't do prenatal care, they, didn't really take care of or whatever, and they're perfectly healthy. And, what did we do? We were thinking we were doing the right thing. So, yeah, a lot of people thought in the medical community around here, thought we were nuts, along with several other families here in town that were in the medical field, and they thought the same thing about them. But I say now that the pediatrician has actually come out and said that it was that reaction, and the documentation that came from the facility back to the pediatrician after Matthew had his had the varicella adverse reaction. They sent it back to her, and she sent it off, and now all three of them have a medical exemption that they don't have to have their vaccines, but it's a little too late. I mean,
So
he had to
he's-
go through that again for the state to finally realize that, that they really couldn't. And there are some children that cannot, their bodies just cannot tolerate it.
So for Matthew in the group home,
Mhm.
he doesn't have to ever have another vaccine again.
None of the three of them do now.
Thank God.
They have finally figured out that yes, there are some children that just, their bodies just can't handle it. Their MMR titers, they did them again, and they're still so high. They still never need another booster. Their pediatrician actually said that they should never have another booster.
Do you know any families or any children or any people that are unvaccinated?
Yes.
And
But they're not in a public school.
No, but what do you think of it? What do you think of their health?
Well, a lot of people that know our story will ask me, well, what do you think about vaccines as a pharmacist? Because that's something that a lot of pharmacies and a lot of big organizations are wanting pharmacists to do, is do the immunizations there in the stores. And they'll ask me what I think about it. And I said, it's not that I think that vaccines themselves are bad. It's just that you need to be well informed about every possibility that can go wrong. You need to be able to separate things out and not just overload their system all at once. It's not that I'm against vaccines. I think you should be able to space them out. I think you should do them one at a time. It should be your choice to get them done. And so I have never, even though a lot of the people I work with do the immunizations, I have not had to do that yet.
And what about your husband? What does he think of the vaccine? Would he ever give any, or?
He has to legally offer it to his patients, but they all know our story, and it's their decision whether to get it or not. But he legally has to offer it to them.
And he tells them about, as doctors should do,
Mm-hmm.
about the side effects
Yeah.
and the insert.
Yes.
I'm
So some
sorry.
people do decide to go ahead and get it, especially the flu vaccine. Whenever you're, expecting and stuff, they always want them to get their vaccine then. So, they have to offer it, but some choose to get it and some choose not to.
It should never have happened. All of this is preventable. Thank you for telling your story.
Sure.
Have you?
I just
have you
hope
writ-
that it helps somebody else. It's too late for my children. They're never going to be like they were. They're never going to be the same children that I had. We're never all going to be able to live together. We're never going to have our family together. And one of our big concerns is that we are older. What's going to happen to them when we're not here? We still both work, trying to care for them, but when we're so old that we can't work or we're not around anymore, what happens to them then? That's our big concern. I'm not angry at anybody. Not angry at God. A lot of people are, but I think that a lot of it could have been prevented, and I just want everybody else to be well informed, better than I was.